Imagine walking through the streets of Athens in the winter of 1941. The air is silent except for the wind scraping through empty alleyways. A body lies at the corner, not from war, but from hunger. And soon you realize this is not an isolated tragedy. Death is everywhere. This was the hidden famine of Nazi-occupied Greece, a catastrophe that killed tens of thousands in mere months. And yet, few people outside Greece ever learned just how deep the suffering went. Stay with me until the end, because this story doesn't just reveal the horrors of the past, it asks an uncomfortable question about what we choose to remember and what we allow to vanish from history. The first winter under Nazi occupation would prove merciless, a silent killer that spared no one. As the cold crept into Athens and Piraeus, the suffering intensified. Streets once alive with chatter and commerce grew eerily quiet, punctuated only by the shuffle of bodies too weak to stand and the whispers of families praying for another meal. Homes, once refuges from the outside world, became tombs as parents, children, and the elderly wasted away in the darkness. Marketplaces, normally bursting with color and life, were reduced to haunting scenes of scarcity. People scavenged for scraps, bread lines stretched endlessly, and yet for many, there was nothing left to hope for. By December, death had become a daily rhythm. 300 people perished each day. Carts hauled bodies silently through the streets, depositing them in mass graves on the outskirts, while neighbors avoided eye contact, too fearful or too weak to help. Occupation authorities turned a blind eye. Some historians argue it was more than neglect, it was deliberate. The world outside Greece barely noticed. No headlines screamed from London or Washington. No urgent telegrams demanded intervention. This catastrophe unfolded in almost total invisibility, leaving the Greek people to endure horrors that the outside world could neither see nor comprehend. And this was only the beginning. The winter's grip would tighten, claiming lives in ways even the harshest imaginations could scarcely fathom. How many people truly perished during the famine? Historians estimate that between 70,000 and 100,000 Greeks lost their lives to starvation under Nazi occupation, with nearly 30,000 dying in that first brutal winter alone. But these numbers, cold and clinical, can never capture the depth of human suffering. Behind each figure lies a story of unbearable loss, of families ripped apart, of children who buried parents, and parents who were powerless to save their children. The streets of Athens and Piraeus were littered not only with the living desperately scavenging, but with the silent witnesses of death. The bodies of neighbors, friends, and strangers alike. Records are fragmentary, some deliberately destroyed to conceal the magnitude of the tragedy. The true scale may never be known. But even in its partial glimpse, the horror is undeniable. These deaths were not just statistics. They were silenced voices, lives erased quietly, leaving only grief in their wake. And yet, amid this despair, a cruel and paradoxical economy continued to operate. The black market flourished, food prices skyrocketed, and those with connections or money could sometimes survive while countless others starved. Survival became a currency, a testament not to justice but to the randomness of fate under occupation. As we count the dead, we confront a chilling reality. In war, suffering is not always visible, and in this famine, it was almost invisible to the outside world. But even as death multiplied, the mechanisms of control, hunger, and despair were just beginning to reveal their full, terrifying power. In a city strangled by hunger, the rules of life and death were brutally simple. If you had money, you could survive. If you didn't, you perished. The famine economy created a world where food became more precious than gold, and the black market emerged as both savior and predator. Bread, olive oil, and grains, once everyday necessities, transformed into commodities available only to the wealthy or well-connected. Desperation drove people to unimaginable lengths. Families traded furniture, clothing, and even heirlooms passed down for generations, all for a single loaf of bread. In some cases, those who had nothing else left sold themselves into servitude or dangerous labor just to earn a scrap of food. Survival became a transaction, a cruel marketplace where humanity was measured in coins, favors, and stolen scraps. Yet even this shadow economy had its limits. The famine's grip tightened and food scarcity intensified. Prices soared beyond reach. Parents watched their children weaken, neighbors hid their own hunger behind closed doors, and whispers of desperation filled the streets. Theft, blackmail, and betrayal became commonplace. The moral fabric of society strained under the weight of starvation. And just when the population thought they had reached the depths of despair, hunger forced an even darker reality to emerge. Organized theft, corruption, and predation on the weakest. The black market could not satiate the deadening hunger of an entire city, and the human cost continued to rise, leaving Athens teetering on the edge of collapse. This is where we begin to see the full machinery of occupation, and why fleeing the cities seemed like the only hope for survival. Some risked their lives to leave the cities and find food in the countryside. Farmers sometimes shared, but not always. They were struggling too. And travel was dangerous. German patrols, bandits, and collaborators all turned the roads into death traps. Many never made it back. Their bodies were left on rural roadsides, a warning to others. Halfway through this story, if you're finding this history as haunting as we do, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us tell more hidden stories like this one, and there are even darker secrets from World War II coming in future videos. But the story of the famine doesn't stop with starvation. It becomes a story about power, politics, and the fight to be remembered. The famine that gripped Greece was no accident. It was engineered, methodical, and chilling in its precision. Occupation authorities systematically requisitioned food from villages and farms, diverting grain, olive oil, and livestock to Germany or to sustain their soldiers. Rural communities, which had once been self-sufficient, suddenly faced empty granaries and barren fields. Greek collaborationist officials were complicit, enforcing quotas and confiscations with a mix of intimidation and bureaucratic efficiency. Entire villages were left with nothing, their residents forced to scavenge or starve. Hunger, in this grim calculus, became a weapon. A population deprived of nourishment is easier to control, easier to bend to the will of an occupier. It saps resistance, breaks spirits, and erodes the very fabric of society. In this way, starvation was not merely collateral damage, it was a tool of domination, a silent terror waged alongside tanks and guns. Yet, even as the Germans tightened their grip, news of the unfolding catastrophe began to seep beyond Greece's borders. Reports of starving children, emaciated adults, and mass deaths slowly reached the outside world. And with this attention came a fragile glimmer of hope, humanitarian intervention, however limited, that could alter the course of suffering. But would it arrive in time to save the thousands already teetering on the edge of life and death? The answer would unfold in the months to come. Reports of starvation reached neutral countries and humanitarian organizations. The International Red Cross eventually negotiated to bring in grain shipments. But bureaucracy was slow, and many died waiting. Still, these shipments offered a glimmer of hope. For many Greeks, this aid was the difference between life and death. Yet even as the famine eased, its scars were permanent. And in the years that followed, Greece faced an uncomfortable truth. There would be no justice. Unlike the bombings, massacres, and battles that dominate World War II history, the Great Famine of Greece remains a ghostly footnote, an atrocity largely erased from global memory. There were no Nuremberg trials to prosecute those responsible for orchestrating starvation. There were no international tribunals demanding justice. Monuments commemorating the dead exist in Greece, but beyond its borders, the victims were virtually invisible. Why was this tragedy forgotten? Perhaps because starvation is a quiet killer. It does not roar like artillery. It does not leave behind smoking ruins that make dramatic headlines. Instead, it creeps in silently, claiming lives one by one, leaving hollowed eyes and empty stomachs in its wake. By the time outsiders learned of the suffering, much of the damage had already been done, and the survivors were too weak or too broken to demand the world's attention. The famine exposes a harsh truth about how we remember history. Not all atrocities are recorded with the same urgency. Some unfold in whispers, and some are deliberately silenced. The Great Famine is a testament to that silence, a reminder that the suffering of tens of thousands can vanish almost completely from global consciousness. And that brings us to the final haunting question. How many other tragedies, quiet and invisible, are waiting to be forgotten today? If a famine can kill 100,000 people in less than a year and still be forgotten by the world, what other tragedies are we failing to see right now? History is not just about remembering the wars and the battles. It's about remembering the hunger, the suffering, the lives that vanished quietly. And telling their stories is one way to bring them back into the light. If you found this story as haunting as we did, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our next deep dive into history's darkest chapters. And when you're done, click on the video now on your screen to explore another hidden story from World War II that history tried to erase. Because the past isn't dead, it's just waiting for us to uncover it.